Um, okay, so today we're going to talk about the gut microbiome. I'm Jamie Baum, and I'm joined by Dr. Aaron Howie. He's a co-leader of DFEND project. I do have to get off right at noon today, so I'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here. So can everyone see these slides? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to mute my video since my internet's a little bit slow today, and then I'll put it in. I muted my mic, sorry. Okay. So today we'll talk about the microbiome, prebiotics, and probiotics. Oh, and Aaron, I think Angela's not on the call, so if there's any questions, maybe you can answer them or try to as I'm speaking. Okay, so today we'll talk about microbiome, prebiotics, and probiotics, and just a general overview of what these things mean. Oops. So our objectives are to define the gut microbiome, define prebiotics and probiotics, identify food sources of prebiotics and probiotics, and define how the gut microbiome is impacted by prebiotics and probiotics. So the gut microbiome is important and our gut is important. Digestive disorders affect our quality of life and overall health of millions of people every year. So issues like acid reflux, GERD, gallstones, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, there's a lot of GI disorders that impact our health. And I think some of these disorders is what led to the study of the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome was first recognized in the late 1990s, and still even almost 20 years later, there's a lot left that's unknown. I think now the gut microbiome is considered almost its own like endocrine or system or organ. It's in the lining of our gut, and just like every surface of our body, it's covered in microscopic creatures, mostly bacteria. And you'll hear these referred to as microbiota, microbes, and there's thousands upon thousands of species of these microbes in our intestine. And so these organisms create the micro ecosystem within our intestines called the microbiome. And even though we don't really notice it's there, it plays a really big role in our overall health and can even affect our mood and behavior. And what you feed your microbiome may have the biggest impact on the health of these bugs in your gut. So this microbial balance in our gut is critically important for our health. So some benefits of a healthy gut microbiota include retrieving some energy from the carbohydrates we can't digest. These bacteria synthesize vitamin K, folate, and biotin that our body can't produce on its own. It displaces the bad bacteria we have in our gut, reduces risk of cancer, can help with mineral absorption, immune health, and it just improve our overall mucosa lining of our gut. And there's many more benefits that are being discovered. And then, so we'll talk more about probiotics. These are the live microorganisms we would eat to populate our gut. And we'll also talk about prebiotics. So these are things we eat, or the food for the microbes. So these are a lot of undigestible carbohydrates and fibers that will help these good bacteria grow. So each person has an entirely unique set of network of microbiota in their body. And this is usually determined by our DNA. And every person is first exposed to microorganisms as an infant, during delivery in the birth canal, and through mother's breast milk. And so I think they've even come up a few years ago showing that babies born via C-section, if they're rubbed on the mother's vaginal opening right after birth, this will help populate their guts with these healthy microorganisms. And exactly which microorganisms the infant is exposed to depends really on the species found in the mother. And later on, environmental exposures and diet can change your microbiome to be either beneficial to your health or put you at greater disease risk. And I think I tried to find the study to show you the figure, but there was a professor who did one study on her own infant's stool samples in their diaper and was able to see a change in the microbial population, like when the child was on antibiotics, when they switched from breast milk to some formula to baby food. And it's really interesting how you can tell just in one child how the bacteria species diversify within the first year of life. So the microbiome consists of microbes that are both helpful and potentially harmful. Most are symbiotic, so this means we as humans benefit and the microbiota benefit. And then some in smaller numbers are pathogenic, and this means they can promote disease. But in a healthy person, pathogenic and symbiotic microbiota exist without problems. But there can be disturbances in this balance, and this could be due to infection, poor diet or high-fat diets, prolonged use of antibiotics or other medications that may destroy bacteria. Then you can get a disruption in these normal interactions and you can become more susceptible to disease. So I know now a lot of times when doctors prescribe antibiotics, they also suggest that people take probiotics to help keep that healthy balance of the gut microbiome. So what impacts our gut microbiome? We talked a little bit about this. How you're born, is it C-section or vaginal? Breastfeeding versus formula feeding. Our overall diet composition, is it high in fruits and vegetables and foods that will feed our gut microbiome, or high in saturated fats and refined sugars? Whether or not we exercise, disease risk, age, certain kinds of drugs and medications, where we live. So we know that in the United States, we have different microbial populations, for instance, than people from Japan. And what's interesting is there have been studies that have shown when people come and live in the US for a brief period of time, they eat our diet, their gut microbial population will change to fit the American diet, and then it will adapt back to their home country diet when they return to normal eating patterns. And this is kind of a complex figure, but I just thought it really does show the role of the gut microbiome in health and disease, and what can come in and what can come out. So everything in red puts people at higher risk for disease, and everything in blue-green is more linked to positive health. So if you see these dotted arrows facing the gut, those are the inputs, and then the solid arrows are the outputs. So you can see things are negative, like sugar intake, too much protein consumption, altered pH, saturated fatty acids. These can all inhibit gut health. And then things like high fiber and probiotic intake can help improve gut health. But we're still learning more and more about this every day. So new data is coming out all the time. And more recently, they actually showed that the microbiota in your gut can communicate to your brain and vice versa. So there's this microbiome gut-brain axis. And so the brain can influence your guts and the epithelial function, so basically cell functions, how it moves, and immune responses. But the microbiota that are produced in your gut can secrete signals that actually cause different circuits of the brain to be activated, can also lead to different immune responses and different nutrients from breaking down the food that can directly influence your central nervous system. So this was from 2017. So there is not so much data yet, but more and more is coming out all the time. So how do microbiota benefit the body? Well, they stimulate our immune system, and they can break down potentially toxic food compounds. Like I mentioned earlier, they synthesize certain vitamins and amino acids, including the B vitamins, vitamin K. And the key enzymes needed to make vitamin B12, they're only found in bacteria and not in plants and animals. So this emphasizes the importance of our microbiome. And some complex carbohydrates, so we talked about these last week, so certain starches and fibers, they're not easily broken down, and they can travel from your mouth all the way to your large intestine relatively intact. And here's where these gut microbiome or these bugs will help break down these carbohydrates. And usually this is just through fermentation, and this causes the production of short-chain fatty acids. So this is a term you'll hear a lot if you read about the gut microbiome, and these short-chain fatty acids can be used by the body as a nutrient source. They play an important role in muscle function, and they may play a role in the prevention of certain chronic diseases like cancers, bowel disorders, diabetes. Um, and some studies have shown in people that these short chain fatty acids can be useful in treatment of ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and antibiotic associated diarrhea. So the microbiota of a healthy person, this will provide protection from these pathogenic organisms that enter our body, such like drinking water that's contaminated or food that's gone bad. And the large family of bacteria found in our gut include Prevotella, Ruminococcus, bacteroids, and firmicutes. And in the colon, it's a low oxygen environment, so there's a lot of anaerobic bacteria like Streptococcus, Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, and Clostridium. So these are some names that might be a little more familiar to some of you. And all these microbes are thought to prevent the overgrowth of some of the more harmful bacteria that by competing for nutrients within the gut. So it's a really complex system. So there's two ways we can help our bodies maintain our healthy gut microbiome balance. So we can help the ones that are already there grow by giving them the foods they like, and these foods are called prebiotics. And we can add living microbes directly to our system called probiotics. So I'll talk a little more about those. So they both help our intestinal microbiota. We consume them both. So prebiotics are things like live cultures that we would find in yogurts and other foods. I'll talk about that in a second. They enter our stomach. They're able to pass through our small intestine and enter our colon. So probiotics, our live bacteria. And they kind of enter the colon through the same mechanisms. So prebiotics, this is a typo. Prebiotics are fibers that feed and maintain bacteria in the gut. So they're the food for the bacteria. They're not living, they're naturally occurring, and they're non-digestible. So like I mentioned before, these tend to be starches and fibers, and they move through our GI tract untouched until they reach our colon where it's fermented. And the fermentation process produces these short-chain fatty acids, which further feed and increase colonies of beneficial bacteria already present in the gut, and these are found in plant foods. So good sources of prebiotics are like steel-cut oats, bananas, flax, chia seed, chicory root, asparagus, onions, garlic, apples. So you can see a lot of fruits and vegetables. And if you were looking on the ingredient label of the foods, you would see these represented as inulin, which is a fiber, fructooligosaccharides. You might find this a lot in infant formula, galactooligosaccharides, resistant starch, gums, and pectins. These are all prebiotics. And so it's important because most Americans don't eat enough fiber, so our gut health is probably not that great. We need to consume 25 to 30 grams of fiber like we talked about last week. And this is in order for our gut bacteria to keep surviving and replicating. So these figures below, this one on the left in the blue shows the recommended range of intake and for whole grains. And you can see the average refined grain intake in the US is much higher for both men and women, and our average whole grains intake is pretty low throughout our entire life cycle compared to the recommendation. And then this is just showing in orange intakes that are above or below the recommended limit. And the blue is where we meet the recommendation. And you can see for fruits and vegetables, we're pretty bad about meeting these. And even total whole grains, we're pretty bad about meeting our goals here, which means most of us probably aren't properly feeding our gut microbiome. So we had the prebiotics, which are non-living and come from undigestible carbohydrates. Then we have probiotics, and these are live microorganisms considered to be good bacteria. And they're normally present in intestines. They aid in digestion, nutrient absorption, fighting disease, and increasing immunity. And it's estimated that 100 trillion microorganisms, including more than 500 different species, live in every person's large intestine and do not generally make us sick. And a lot of you probably heard of probiotics. Probiotic supplement sales were more than $35 billion in 2015. So that was just 5 years ago. And in 4 years, it's projected to be over $65 billion. So it's a big industry. Fermented foods. So you may have heard a lot about fermented foods on social media. There's a lot of bloggers that talk about the benefits of eating fermented foods. And this is because they're a great source of probiotics because they contain live bacteria. So some food examples are kefir, which I'll talk about on the next slide, plain yogurt, old or aged cheese, so something like Parmesan or Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, fermented vegetables, miso, microalgae, pickles, raw honey, sauerkraut, kimchi, and kombucha are all foods that are fermented that are thought to promote these probiotics and gut health. So here's an example of kefir and yogurt. I first heard of kefir maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, and I had to go Google it. It's a fermented milk drink, but it basically just tastes like you're drinking yogurt. It's pretty good. It's sold now in, I think, most Walmarts. And this one is from Lifeway Kefir. That's, I think, the most popular one at Walmart. And you can see that it contains 12 live and active kefir cultures, and they'll list them on the side of the packaging. And then this one on the right is just from Activia Yogurt. So it also talks about the live cultures they contain. So that's how you know that this is a probiotic. So it's going to populate your gut with live organisms. And another one is kombucha. I know it's really popular in Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas. And these two examples on the right, this JR's kombucha and Moniker ferments, I think those are produced here in Northwest Arkansas. And so for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a fermented, sweetened black or green tea. And it's consumed for its supposed health benefits. And it said supposed because there have been no clinical studies actually proving the health benefits of kombucha. And it's produced by fermenting sugared tea and using a culture that's sometimes called a mushroom. And these living bacteria that are put in it are one of the reasons it's called a probiotic, in that it's part of the popularity of the drink. So this is one called Synergy. I think it's sold nationally. I've seen it here at our local co-op. And so, they have a lot of promises, and they have nice little packages that make you feel good. Like you'll be enlightened if you drink this kombucha. And so you can see here, though, it's not calorie free. So if you were to drink one of these, it would be 150 calories, and it would have, some sugar and some carbohydrates. And you can see down here at the bottom which probiotic organism it contains. This is an example of something with a lot of claims. So we did talk earlier a little bit about symbiotics. So these are prebiotics, or good bacteria promoters, and probiotics that work together synergistically. So the prebiotics are breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the probiotics, which restore and can improve GI health. And so that's gastrointestinal health. So when they work together, they're just called symbiotics. So this was a really brief overview of gut microbiota, but really consuming a variety of foods that provide both prebiotics and probiotics is the best way to promote a healthy balance of friendly gut bacteria. This is just a reminder of what some of the prebiotics, so the foods that feed our bacteria, and some probiotics that can help repopulate our gut. And then this is before I take questions. Next week, we'll have a guest speaker from UAMS, Arkansas Children's Nutrition Center, talking about the latest science of dietary fat, Dr. Elizabeth Forsheim. And her research has been picked up a lot lately by the popular press, because she's shown that the timing of fat intake can actually influence our metabolism during the day. So she'll talk about that. And so I'm happy to take any questions anyone may. Oh, good, Angela's back. So I'm not an expert on gut microbiome. I will put that disclaimer out there. I do follow one of my old lab mates who is an expert in gut microbiome. So maybe I can help you, because I read her Instagram before this started. But she does a lot of podcasts, and I mean, I think it's a little bit at the scientific level, but she does really try to explain the microbiome so that everyone can understand it.
We did have someone ask if you can speak a little bit more or at all about the interaction between exercise and its effect on the microbiome. So I don't know if either you or Dr. Howie has any comments on that.
Dr. Howie?
So I should have anything about exercise and the gut microbiome.
Let me just find the link real fast for so I don't know if she has her own podcast, but she's interviewed a lot on other people's podcasts. And here is, so she is who I would refer people to. Let me find what her Instagram username is. It's just her whole name. And she puts a lot of useful information, and that's her Instagram, I guess. There we go. She posts a lot of information, like when new papers come out or there's something in the news about the gut microbiome. She does a really good job in deciphering everything and breaking it down for people to understand. And she'll talk about what's known, what's not known, and she puts links to the podcast she's on, usually on her Instagram stories. And she recently said she always used to promote drinking kombucha and intake of probiotics, so consuming the live bugs. But, and I think light of people not having enough fruit and vegetable consumption or high fiber diets to feed these bacteria, that now she has switched her stance recently to consuming more of the prebiotics, so eating the high fiber foods. So I'm trying to think. So my guess is that exercise must send signals or nutrients to the microbiome, but maybe we can work on a little fact sheet about that with some breakdowns. I can look some more into that. But that's a great question. I think the microbiome is here to stay. It's been 20 years and they still don't know everything that it can do. Let's see what she said. She did say, what do we know? Let's see. So I think, she was just saying that only like 60% of the bugs in the average microbiome have even been identified. So there's a lot more work. But you can start to see, I think, as we move through these talks, that everything we eat is connected to overall health. So I think most people in nutrition or exercise science would say, as long as you eat a balanced diet, get enough fruits and vegetables, and, meet the physical activity guidelines, like you should be in pretty good shape. If you want to consume, in the case of pickles and sauerkraut, naturally fermented. Yeah, thanks, Natasha. So like I said, there's probably a lot of people out here that know a lot more than I do. Definitely a lot more people that know a lot more than I do on the topic, but I think, you hear a lot of these words used interchangeably, so I just wanted to help define that. Is there anything that was missing that you guys would want more information about? No? Does anyone take probiotics or prebiotic supplements? I take probiotics from Sam's Club. They're pretty good. Makes her hungry. So yeah, and I think, and I've noticed when I even switch brands of probiotics, because they'll have different species or different bugs, that you might get a little GI distress in the transition. Is there anyone who's a regular kombucha drinker? I just can't. I've tried a lot of times.
Dr. Baum, my daughter is, she's in nursing school right now, but she's kind of always had a history of allergy and kind of what they call leaky gut. And she swears by the kombucha that you buy at Walmart. Like there are some of them that she can significantly tell a difference. You know, she just feels better overall. So I think there's a little bit to that, but I'm always wondering about the processing of the product and how it survives. I guess I'm kind of interested in the food science part of that, because I know when you process those things to be safe, it seems like there would have to be some kind of pasteurization, but maybe not. I don't know anything about it. So,
Yeah, and it could be that it's the milk that's pasteurized before they add in the cultures.
yes.
But I
And
am not a food scientist, so that is my guess.
well, and the ones I'm talking about are not the milk based, like not the kefir, but the kombucha.
The tea based.
Yes.
So I honestly have no idea how it's produced. I guess the thing is I don't drink it because it has 150 calories. And since I always have to watch my calorie intake, I'd rather spend it on something that tastes better. I mean, but some people, I mean, like Suzanne, the woman that I was telling you about, who's this gut microbiome expert that I was in grad school with, she like evaluates kombucha brands like randomly. And I know the two I posted from Fayetteville are really popular. And so I think, people swear by them. Yeah, and it would be interesting to know more about like how it survives from the food science perspective. I don't even know if we have a fermentation expert on campus. I think Dr. Threlfall in food science knows a little bit, so maybe I can get her to answer some of these questions, and we can put maybe a little email out in our listserv. I'll write that down.
Well, I think it's like every other supplement that's out there. You wonder which ones legitimately have the live bacteria. I mean, you're always trying to evaluate the best products and whether they truly have what they supposedly have. So it'd be interesting to know, but we can also look up her podcast too. That sounds very interesting.
So she doesn't have her own. I'll just put that out there. She's just gets interviewed a lot, but she links it on there when she is. And Suzanne's a sort of nutrition scientist, gut microbiome person, but she would know about the safety. But I thought, isn't kombucha, is it considered a supplement? Angela, do you know? Because I think it's a food. It's sold in the food sections usually.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually considered a supplement.
So it should have that. And I know like when some of the local people do produce their kombucha in the food science department at the Arkansas Food Innovation Center. So I can check with them to know more about processing. But my guess is because it's sold in the food section, it has to have those live cultures in there. So it must be something that's added in after maybe the heat process. And tea, I mean, I guess tea is probably different. And so I actually got a lot of this information off Wikipedia for kombucha. So they do have a lot of details about the production side. But yeah, I think, like I said, I have limited knowledge over this topic, but I know it's a hot topic. And, sometimes even when you go to conferences, well, how does that affect the microbiome? I don't know. I'm a muscle person. But I would love, I mean, if this is something, I always have tried to align with Suzanne to get her to give a presentation, but sometimes it's hard with the East Coast time zones. But I know the most recent podcast she was on, she was with another person we did our Ph.D. with. And I can send that out as well. Would these things help after a person has a virus? I guess you would have to ask your doctor.
I know there are people who think like kombucha can help with boosting your immune system.
Yeah.
How much of that is actually research based and backed by research, I don't know. But yes, speak with your doctor about that one.
But I think, this is something we have to put some time into, like a couple more fact sheets. So we can put something in about exercise in the microbiome. And I can check just about what happens to the microbiota, and we can put a little note during processing. And we can put a note in next week's DFEND newsletter to update everyone on that. And like Dr. Howie said, the recommendation for probiotics is really after a bacterial infection. So anytime you would be taking antibiotics because sometimes they can give you diarrhea because they hurt the healthy bacteria in your gut. Anyway, okay, well, it's noon, so I'm sorry I have to leave kind of abruptly today. But thanks, everyone. And like Angela said, next week's speaker is Dr. Borsheim. She has some really great research. And thanks, everyone, for calling in. And we hope to pet the dog. I will. She must not like the talk. She started pacing pretty heavily. Anyway, have a nice weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for your time.